Welcome back, Johnny. Or you
Hello.
should welcome back me.
Welcome back, Andrew.
So, plan is today is to get into the questions. We did enough talking
You think we should answer
ourselves.
them questions, do you?
I think maybe we should answer the questions that we were sent in. People that
Epic fail
genuinely wanted to
last
answer
week,
it. Right. Well, let's no further ado. Let's get cracking then. So next question was by James Armstrong, who is a final year physio, just reading off computer, final year physio student and out of Plymouth University, who's kind of really forward thinking for he's only final year, and he's really kind of pushing things towards education and stuff for students and trying to help students out. And it was great for him to ask a question around he also has a running background, big into running and stuff like that. And he's also running a YouTube channel. So it's all I'm laughing because of you, not at him.
Right, I got it. It was very subtle, but I got it.
It's just people looking, going, "Oh yeah, he's getting smart about his YouTube channel." But no, yeah. So he's great. Fair play to him. Jesus, I didn't think about what my name was when I was in my final year. Never mind doing stuff he's doing. So he said, "Right, would love to hear you discuss the overcomplication of basic strength training for, say, runners," because he's a runner. So I think we could stick with running, I think. But I think it will cover all sports. Thinking around the idea of movements being overcoached. So it's kind of like overcomplication of basic strength training, overcoaching, and would be interested in both your thoughts around this. For example, making things like a simple squat really complex, which puts so many beginners off. And in his case, runners that could benefit from strength training, but they kind of get binned off because there's too many things to think about, for example. For example, he's also said like knees over toes, that sort of stuff. Good discussion on how much coaching does someone need when starting strength training.
Right.
Do you want to start or?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, I got a strong belief that there are fundamental movement patterns that will go across most sports, because you'll find that most people during any sport are going to do some form of squatting, more than likely, or at least, in some way. Also, hip hinging is another thing that you'll find they do. And there'll be a push and a pull movement. And there'll probably be some requirement of some sort of core stability. So I think as long as them fundamental movement patterns are within the strength and conditioning, more strength phase, then I think you're winning. But it depends. It is very, very important to be sport specific in my eyes.
So I think So based on that, just more around your expertise around. So I have a couple of opinions on this, but I'd like yours. Is the overcoaching element. So let's just take, he's taken a squat example, and as you just said, it's going to go across a lot of sports. It's a good muscle builder, it's a compound lift, et cetera, et cetera. So let's pick a squat. It's going to work well for a runner for obvious reasons. So do you see that, I suppose he's kind of looking for that kind of a coaching approach to the squat, and your kind of idea of overcoaching it, and maybe kind of being hung up on certain things when you're squatting, particularly in a beginner, I think is what he's saying, as opposed to a powerlifter where you're maybe addressing a few other things. Yeah,
I mean, I think first and foremost, a squat is in its simplest form is sitting down and standing up. If you're going to put it simply. And I have 3 rules when it comes to coaching something. I want to keep it simple, specific, and safe. As long as it's safe, so people get this idea in their mind that there's a textbook way to do a movement, but people are different heights, they're different weights, they've got different limb lengths. You can have 2 people exactly the same height sit down and they're completely different heights. So all these things come into the factor. So keeping it safe is going to be my first port of call. So if I've got someone who's squatting, first thing I'm going to ask them is just to show me what they feel is a squat, because there might not actually be any need for coaching whatsoever. They might do a squat and I go, wow, that's beautiful. But had I have gone and said, right, you need to do this, this, and this, and make sure that this is in place, they might have got so confused that they end up looking like they're dancing or, trying to balance on ice or something like that. So yeah, as I said, simple, specific, and safe. I've had, for example, I had a client once. This story makes me laugh, and it was my first introduction to a word I'd never heard before. I was trying to teach a deadlift, and I'd gone through all of the different ways that at the time I knew to describe how to do a deadlift. And one day she came in and it was deadlift time again, and I was showing her how to do it. I was showing her the hinge element of it and everything like that. And she looked at me and she went, "Oh," and I said, "What?" Thinking, we've got it. She went, "You mean a slut drop?" And I was like, "A what?" Turns out to be from some movie, but I kid you not, it's pretty much a deadlift. And I was just like, "That's amazing." So there are so many, my point being, there's so many different ways to coach things. And actually you could go through the motions of trying to be, really over-describe movements, when actually you can just get someone to understand it. I saw Francis the other day on Instagram coaching a deadlift. Yes. And he had a great example, which if I'm honest, I'm not sure if I've heard it before. I might have heard it and forgot, but I certainly, when I was watching, I was like, yeah, that's a good way to put it. But he said, imagine a waiter was putting a waiter's tray into your stomach, and it creates that hinge feeling. So almost like you're trying to dodge it. And I thought that's a nice way to explain it. And that's the sort of thing, me and you can talk about different flexions and different muscles and different movement patterns, and we understand that. But to a normal person, slut drop works, and sitting down, standing up in the squat works.
So I think that follows up into, that's perfect kind of setup for me. It's like we planned this, but we didn't really. We're not that organized. Well, so we all develop. So I think we overcoach. Everyone overcoaches. I think that's just no coach will ever say that they haven't overcoached. We've all done it. I often say when I'm teaching as well, like especially like the hint, because the deadlift tends to be a harder one, especially for physios who don't teach it that often. When they're learning how to teach it, they really struggle, and you can over cue too many things in that. Yeah. And I give an explanation of a 15-year-old girl who I had once, and it was just like. And I've got two examples, one with my wife and one with this 16-year-old who was like just getting, exactly. But she was getting really annoyed though. So she couldn't get it. So she was a competitive netball player, not getting something. And it just, no matter how many cues I gave her, and I just found myself adding another cue, and she's just getting worse and worse and getting irritated. So yeah, I had to pull the plug on it and just give her, I actually ended up just doing a bridge, and we moved on, and everything else was fine. She's competitive. She wants to be able to nail it. So I left it, and I didn't tell her to do anything. I said, we'll come back to that. There's no big drama. I tried to take I messed up really. We spent 15 minutes, and I probably should have. I just kept adding cues. So when she came back the next time, I just kind of went, "Do you want to just try that thing we did last time?" And she went, "Okay," and then bang, that's it. She just did it. I went, "Yeah, that's it," and then we just moved on. The other thing was, so what the hell happens there? In learning and stuff. The second thing was my wife was getting back into fitness, and she was doing a deadlift kind of pattern. And I kept saying to her, "Push your hips back." And she's like, and because coaching your partner is different, it's totally different. I lose my patience way quicker. I was even afterwards went, "Oh my God, I just trained you like an absolute asshole." Like it was bad. She was like, she took it quite well, but I was like, I was an asshole then. I was a proper asshole. I was just like getting frustrated. Why aren't you getting it? Yeah. But she went, "What do you want about my hip?" And she went, "What do you want me to move?" And she went, "Oh, my ass," as in move my ass back. Yeah. And that was it. And then I kept saying it, because I kept saying hip, she was going, "What are you on hip?" And then I went, "Oh no, ass, move your butt back, push the butt." She was like, "All right. So and it was like, then done. So the reason I mentioned that is I've just heard a recent, I just came across him. He was on Eric Cressy, the baseball S&C coach in the States, interviewed Nick Winkelman, who's another S&C coach from the States, but he's in Ireland at the moment, and he's involved in Irish rugby. And he's written a book called The Language of Coaching, which I've only heard of him recently and heard his interview. And because I've always kind of gone, right, I have my own strategies for coaching, and I've always known we over cue, and I know in certain people I do something different. And he contextualized it now and put it into a book, and he's looked down the research behind it. He's definitely worth following, and I can't wait to get the book. But he talks about with Eric Cressy this like different loop systems about when you're about to coach something. So he talks about a long loop and a short loop. And the long loop, this was really cool. He's DDCD. I just have to remind myself off the notes here. Is describe it. So describe the movement, but you do that first. This is what we're going to do, and you describe whatever that might be. So that might be, look, we're going to go down to the bar, we're going to stick our hips out, and we're going to pick that bar off the ground. That's for example, okay? And you put it back down again. So you can describe, you might say, put your feet like this. You may give them internal cues, so where your body should be. And then an external cue is pick the thing up off the ground quick or slow or whatever it might be. So you got external and internal cues. Then you demo it without the cues. He was saying, because if you try and do two things at once, you're giving too much information again. So the visual and the verbal can get mixed. And it depends on how that person learns as well. And you may not realize what best suits them. So again, you take the verbal and then you take and then the demo. So he did specifically say kind of keep them separate. And then what he was saying then is cueing it. So that's when you set them up, and then the cue is that last thing you say to them before they do the lift or the movement pattern you want them to do. But this is what he's saying needs to be not necessarily internal, but actually external, based on some research that looked at soccer players kicking a ball into a target area. And what they were given was, if I get the stats right now, so one group was coached for every single rep. So they were told, right, do this, do this. Every time they kicked the ball, they were coached 100% of the time. And then another part of the group were taught 33. So one in every third kick, they were told a cue. Right. There was two groups. So one with 100% cues, 30% cues. But then there was two groups split in with internal cueing or external cueing. So therefore, kick the ball into that target at a certain pace with your right foot, or not even your right foot. The other one might be position your knee in this position. I want your hip to come back, and I want you to strike the ball through the front of your foot. Internal cueing. And what that study was, and it's the researcher, I will find out and put in the notes. She's here somewhere. A lady who's done loads of research, and I think she's based in Las Vegas. I can't remember the lady's name, but she's done the research. And what they found from that, in that particular study, now every study needs to be repeated several times to be really valid, but what was seen in that was that the external cues had better performance, significantly over the group that were given the internal cues. But also within that external cue group, the group that did 30% of the time cues did just as well as 100%. So the idea is that you do not have to cue every single time. No. And maybe external cueing is quite important, but cueing being just the cue bit, the bit before you just are about to execute the movement, not the bit where you're describing the movement, where you may start to say, look, I want your hips here, I want your feet in this position, I want you to do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then what, and then he was saying, so you cue it, and that needs to be either something really emotional or something memorable for them. Nothing to do, because if you start to go into angles and stuff, it's unlikely for them to remember. So, and this is definitely true when I cue now. So it's stuff like we always say: spread the floor, push the floor away, crack the nut. You know, all the analogies of those things. I had an old guy once. He was 74 or something, and he was doing a bridge, and I kept saying crack the nut, and he went, oh, he cleared up the dust after the walnuts I cracked and all that. But he remembered the cue. It was visual. It was funny. He was able to come back the next week and go, make a joke about it, but he knew the cue, and that he knew that's what he needed to do as he came through it. And then his last, So then the last one was debrief, and the debrief bit is tapping into what you were saying. Was you asked then how that went and how they felt, and did they understand the cue, and did the cue help, and what did the cue mean to them? Because actually they might go, he was giving examples, and I've had that before where, like my wife, I was like going hip back. I needed to say butt or hip, bum back. That's her feedback was that. So I should have gone, right, well, that's what that means to her, or that's what this movement means to me. So you can teach it.
Also about trying to understand the position that they're in as well, because sometimes when you say back, that can feel like back, but actually it's up. So it's about understanding that principle of it as well. What position they're in.
So then you can you debrief yourself, it's not just the client. You're not just going, all right, I got to say, as he said, you're not just going to shout it louder next time. You're actually going, you've listened to them.
That's why I'm currently schooling my children.
So it's this guy you get this debrief. So it's kind of, so then it's like, how did that feel? Are those cues working for you? Does that make sense? And then does it look well? And then when you do that, and that's in the early stages when you're teaching somebody, and I think that will stop you. So not having to give so many cues. Yes, when you describe a movement, you may go into some detail, but actually when it comes to game time or movement time, keep the cue very, very analogy based, or very emotive, or something that they go, yeah, I get that, right? Their language. And until you've got their language, it's just like anything else. It won't happen.
That is exactly right. When you've got their language, because I'd had another client who, you know, she probably wouldn't describe herself as athletic and had never really been to a gym before. And we were going through, I think it was a squat motion pattern. And I was always trying to get her to keep her chest up, because she did a lot of leaning forward and things like that. And also just to get in her to instigate the lift by pushing back with, you know, sort of collapsing the knee slightly and then pushing back. And we went through all these things, and she was getting it, but it just wasn't, it didn't feel like it was coming together. Do you know what I mean? The movements are happening, but it was quite clunky. And in the end, I'd be like push your bum back. That's it. Yep. Keep your chest up. And the only cue in the end that worked was one that she came up with. And every time I say it to her, she knows exactly what she's going to do. And that was boobs and bum. I said to her, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to cue that going forward, but you know, as long as you understand it.
This is the thing of coaching.
You know?
Yeah, like, you know, I respond well to swearing. Right, I'm not going to start swearing now, but I respond well to that. So I know if someone kind of uses my language or even says that to me, I'm already hooked onto that kind of way, the way of things. So as she said, that might make her laugh, but it's emotive. It makes her go, that's what I need to do.
You never forgot it, that's for sure.
You're never going to forget, and you're having it, and then you have that coach relationship. So it's not pervy or it's not weird, because they've come up, you know, she's come up with it, and that's the kind of thing. So it's actually,
it's not something that you would dare to say, you know, without that situation, really. Like, I would never use that cue with any other female client, but if they came up with it, then you latch onto it, because it's a way that they understand it and get it right every single time. And I think that's part of the problem as well, is sometimes as coaches, you worry and over worry in this very complicated world about offending people or overstepping a boundary. So you try to keep things as professional as you can, which sometimes is quite complicated, when actually all you need to say is boobs and bum. and they get it, you know.
Yeah, and that comes back to, there's two things there I wanted to mention, which was, I'll come back to the short loop version of what he says, which is quite cool as well. But what when I read James' question, I originally just kind of go, there's one guy jumps out to me, but it's the same in rehab as it is for strength and conditioning or in conditioning world. That the first thing, we talked about it in depth last time, about the trustworthy relationship, developing that is absolutely key. So it's kind of, and if you've got a runner who's coming to you to do strength training, who, like, running is the opposite of strength training. It's to try and, you know, you're not lifting a heavy knee, you're trying to go as far as you can, you know, as quick as you can, but as far as you can. You're not going to carry a big lump on your back to do that. That's going to be inefficient. Yeah. So strength training is on the other spectrum, isn't it? You know, it's that. So, like, lots of people are not going to be drawn to that. It's generally, you know, they like doing that stuff and not this. So I think what answers James' question is, the coaching even starts in that trustworthy relationship, that the guys that, you know, the when I say guy, I mean girl and man, obviously. When they're coming in, it's kind of like, why you've come here to maybe have a program to develop strength, because you know, you've heard, and there's some research and there's some people saying that it's quite good for performance, but that person still is like, oh, I don't like doing it.
It needs to be relative, though, doesn't it?
It needs to, yeah. So it's kind of like, how are you going to communicate with them before you've even started coaching the deadlift or squat? How are you communicating with them so that they actually go, so that's going to equal a more likely performance enhancement result. So you're going to get a better time. Because some runners might be like, you know, I just want to get around and not really be sore the next day.
Yeah.
And then you've got, I want to be sub-3 marathon runner. So you've got to decipher what's the goal here, because if you want to be a sub-3 marathon runner, then the type of strength training and the intensities and to fit it in around maybe a 6-day running program that they might be doing, you then have to fit that in. Yeah. Whereas maybe somebody who just likes to do the 10Ks every so often and just runs 3 times a week, and then they've got to fit in your program on top of that, and they've got kids and everything, and actually it's more priority. The running is just a side thing, and then you're trying to chuck in more training.
It's so important that the two work together, because otherwise you'll end up getting worse at both, frankly.
Yeah, you're not very good strength training, and you're shit at running as well, or you're too tired, or you just stop missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's what he's kind of getting at. He's like, kind of, it's overcomplicated. It's kind of like, all right, you need to do all these things. And I think from running, I think sometimes, you pick a couple of exercises. You hit the major groups in the lower leg. You know, if you're going to go really, like we said, you know, your big muscles involved in running, you're going to have your calf, your quads, your adductors, and your hip extensors. You know, so your glutes and stuff like that. So you can hit them in 2 or 3 exercises quite well, done if it's programmed well with good intention, and even weights or not weights, whatever you want to do, and just made very simple. That's the way and then if that person can see that and is able to fit it into their lifestyle, and then is able to then complete that over maybe a 6 to 8 week period where it becomes a bit of a habit, and they can hopefully start to see those benefits in their performance, then grand. But you can't bully somebody into this too early, especially, it kind of goes on to another question from another runner later on, but it's all about that runner needs to have that trust in me or you to then go, right, okay, so I'm going to start adding this in, and that's going to give me these benefits. But they won't do it unless you've developed that relationship we talked about last week.
I mean, in essence, when answering the question, I made a note of how it is basically keeping it simple. You know, squat can be seen as sitting down, standing up. I've seen somebody get the cue of the deadlift by me asking them to pick up a very light kettlebell off the floor, and then there'll be a slight arc in their back, and I'll say, can you just straighten your back out? Boom, deadlift, right there. Just from asking them to straighten their back. Because essentially a deadlift is picking something up off the floor with a straight back, you know? So most of the time, if you keep it as simple as that, if you can get it within them first few cues, then you're okay. And like you said, as you experience, once you start layering cues on, you've just shook the snow globe, and they're like, whoa, I'm not listening anymore. And you know, once you get to things like pushing and pulling, and also the squat and the deadlift, I mean, this is an entirely different topic, which I'm sure we'll get onto at some point, is tension. Once you've got to get that tension, you've got to command their muscles to do the work, because we can all do this, but can we do this really slowly using all the muscles that we intended to use? Because unless you train that, you'll always just be doing that, you know, or you'll always just be free falling and pushing, you know. It is
the biggest thing that I do on my course is to teach tension. Most physios will walk away from it.
I remember the seminar we did, and I never forget that. It was hilarious. I was doing the seminar, and it was the first one I'd done with you. Do you remember, over at the CrossFit box? And I was talking about tension, and the whole time I kept looking over to you just to make sure that I wasn't going off tangent, and you were writing stuff down, and you were looking at me, and I was like, oh, you know, what's happening here? Is he not liking what I'm saying? And I said to you afterwards, I said, everything all right? You know, writing a lot down. You went, yeah, it was good stuff, mate. I'm going to nick that and use that. I was like, oh, cheers.
Yeah, it was terminology on, it was even like, because I know how important it is, and I've got it for certain things, but it was like when I went over and did a bench press session with you, and then just adding in certain things, then I was like, oh yeah, and then that I instantly...
Well, it's like what you did with me with the hip opener as well, and the squats. Yeah, I've coached that now many times. It's absolutely brilliant, you know, absolutely brilliant.
And all that is
very logical as well. Very, very logical. You're just attacking the glutes and the hip insertions from all angles, and then you know, getting them to work together, which is perfect. You know?
I think that is definitely a separate one. We might be moving away from that. So I think that deserves a better answer. I think from that we've gone off. Just the last thing to sum up James' question, or that just things, the stuff from Winkleman's work in his book and what he's been saying, I just really liked it then, because he said, because that's what I was kind of saying, a lot of the stuff he was saying, I was like, oh, no, I think it's just good when someone says, right, there's research behind this, and this is possibly why, you know, I've done it in other rehab stuff where I'm going, I kind of know why I do that, but it just seems to work, and I've heard it somewhere or whatever, and next thing you know, it's great when someone's saying, well, actually it's quite evidence-based as well. That's a double win, really, you know.
Yeah, you always need that.
Yeah, you do need that, and you can't just keep going, well, I think it just works for me, because it just sounds a little bit wishy-washy, especially in medical world. We love a bit of a research article. So the short loop was then with more experienced, where you cue it, so it's straight into cue. So like you boobs and bum, spread the floor, whatever one, breath in, whatever it might be, then do it. So cue it, do it, debrief it. So that's all you have to do. So literally it's like bang, or they in turn. And what I really liked about his stuff is that the guy, the athlete doesn't, or patient doesn't have to look at you. You don't even have to cue it, right? We're going to do these. We're going to do the squat. Right, we're going to do it. And you watch it 3 or 4 times. And then you might say, if it's not looking right, or if it's not, so how's that feeling getting it? You might just say, right, we're going to do it. They'll cue themselves. Then they do the movement, and then you debrief it. How did it feel? What do you think? Was there any questions about it?
And
so
you might actually,
you don't even fucking say anything yourself. They're doing it all. Whereas they might go, well, what do you want to do? What's it again? All right, actually, I want you to, come out of the blocks like a rocket, or I want you to push off the ground as fast, just hammer the ground. That's it. Just think of hammering the ground. And in the previous session, it was a jackhammer or whatever it might have been in their head. So you cue it, you do it, and then you debrief it. And then it's that constant, that's coaching. That's not just giving somebody a deadlift. That's listening. And it's the same thing in rehab or in the medical world, where you're listening to try and find out where the clues are to find the diagnosis. We're listening to the patient, to the client, to see where they're going to learn movement better, and what environment, what position, what language we're going to use to really get them to execute that. And I think that's
the cue that worked the most for me with the squat when I was initially having trouble with it was strange cue, really, which was externally rotate your femurs. And people say in the squat, drive your knees, but actually there's a huge difference between externally rotating your femurs and driving your knees outwards. And actually that fundamental way of looking at it helped me in so many ways when it came to my squat.
So you found that externally rotating cue was better than
so externally rotating my femurs, actually actively trying to think of, instead of the muscle or the actual physical leg, think of the actual bone actually externally rotating. So like this. And what that did was it made me open my hips, which allowed me to get past the point where I wasn't able to get, and which made me shoot forward every single time. So as soon as I kept us up straight back and I externally rotated my femurs, I'd go down in a nice straight line, because I was actively using their muscles to open up, all the time.
So that's the thing. That's such a specific...
You can't use that. You can't use that with other people. But that's what I'm saying.
But that's all right. But we treat, I treat physios and doctors and medical people. Yeah. So if I can get that cue, they go, oh, I know what you mean. Because sometimes I do that. Because like, I want you to feel like that. Sometimes it's teaching physios about movements kind of easy. What I really want you to do is externally rotate or internally rotate.
Because that's how they understand the body. They've gone to a point where they've gone a bit more in depth with it. So they need to, and you could go in depth again on that, couldn't you? You could go and go.
If it works for them.
Yeah, and then on the flip side of the coin, I went to a seminar by Ed Cohen, and he was doing deadlifts and squats again, actually. And his cue was open your taint, which at the time I wasn't entirely sure what that meant, and then I figured out what it meant, and it actually works. So it was such a crude term, but everyone in the room laughed, and most people, bar me at the time, understood what it meant. And actually, that very simple action, it really makes a big difference. It's how it feels. I always say that with my clients. The day they get it is when they know how it feels, because they're not looking for anything external now. They're looking inside for the answers. Okay, that didn't feel right. Why didn't it feel right? Because I've got a bit of tightness in my glutes. Warm your glutes up. Done. They can make that analysis of themselves on their own in a gym environment without me, which is... You've won.
That's the essence. That's the essence of a coach. That's the essence of a coach.
Once they're off and they're doing it on their own,
and it's the essence of a therapist, or a therapist. It's not a physio. It's just a therapist. Is to be able to get somebody to recognize when their particularly irritable condition is getting to a point where they need to act themselves and not have to rely on ringing me and say, well, what do I do now? They should eventually, after a period of time, because you've coached them. It's just like coaching them how to do a movement. You've coached them how to manage a condition or manage the situation. Really? Yeah. And then therefore the language comes in. So I think to summarize is, I think, we do overcoach. I think when it comes to runners, make it very meaningful, and they need to be able to already understand where it's going to go in their week and not take away from the thing they love. Keep the exercises, as James has kind of alluded to, simple in there, and you've mentioned it in your strategy, simple, specific. Yeah, and the same thing, we could really dive down rabbit holes, so we'll come away from that, but the specific and simple is quite...
As if we haven't already.
Yeah, we could be here on the same question. We could do exactly what we did last week and wear that. So I think, yeah, hopefully that kind of, you're always going to make the mistakes of overcoaching. So like anything that you feel guilty about or think you've messed up, the only way to do that is to learn from that and just kind of go, okay, next time. I've done it many times.
But sometimes as well, you know, again, it comes down to the confidence of the coach as well. I will feel no way about spending a whole session on one lift. You know, where some people feel like they've got to, you know, oh, we've got to move on to this because I've written it down on a piece of paper. You've got to be able to adapt. You know, you've got to be able to adapt to what's in front of you. Sometimes people walk through the door and I've got this lovely workout for them. They throw their bag down. I've had a crap day. Right then, start immediately crossing things off because I know there's no way they're going to do it. Maybe get the boxing gloves out today and see what happens. You know,
yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to be adaptable and just keep things simple. I mean, squatting, deadlifting. You know, if you're a power lifter, yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff that you need to understand. But if you're doing it for fitness or you're doing it for a sport, maybe you don't need to know that. I mean, there's a totally different way that you would squat as a powerlifter than how you would squat as an athlete, because your objective is to go into competition and actually do that lift. So there's so much that needs to be understood about that. But for an athlete, you just need to make it transfer into their sport, maybe correct a weakness or enhance the strength. You know, that's basically what you're trying to do, isn't it? Anyway, cool. I digress.
Yeah. Sound. Right, I think that was good. Hopefully that's answered it, James. Right, next up, another runner, Grace Brock. So Grace is a good mate of mine, international runner, and she's over in Boise State University in Idaho on a scholarship for running. So she's a phenomenal athlete, really, and just mindset-wise, she sums up an awful lot of stuff. She's an incredible athlete. She's asked a really cool question, though. I call all the questions cool. I don't know why I do that. Anyway, should I adapt an S&C session so this is now, we're talking now, she's gone very specific to herself. So this is going to be at a level where somebody is international level, running at state university level in America. So, you know, bear that in mind when we're answering this question. So should I adapt an S&C session if I am sore from running workout or a previous S&C session? So I think we discussed this a little bit on the phone when I was originally talking to you about questions and stuff. And I think just before we get diving into it as well, I think first and foremost, I think we both agreed that her most important thing is running and the sport of running, if we're going to just stick with that and not go digress into other sports. But generally when someone's trying to get better at their sport, they should do the sport more. That's, you know, the sport is the key thing, or they should be, everything should be geared towards the competition so that they don't get injured in training. They get injured in competition, if anything, because they're going eyeballs out, you know. The other thing as well, I suppose, is the caveat here is she's going to have a lot of input from different you're going to have an S&C coach, probably therapists, and probably a running coach, all looking hopefully to get a result and to push performance. And when you're at that level, you will be reaching into that. You know, that's the skill of the coaches at that level and have the experience at that level to be able to kind of know when to push somebody at the right time of the season, how close to a race. Every athlete themselves, some athletes can take a beating for longer, and some athletes need more recovery time. Like, that's the thing, and that's so specific, and that's very difficult to answer in one question as well. So it's kind of like, what are your recovery strategies? And actually, you know, someone might actually take longer to recover, and somebody actually can get hammered a little bit more often, and then needs it somewhere else. You know, it needs to work on other things. So I think what we need to do is, when we're answering this question, is just to bear that in mind, that we're not running coaches. So we've got to, you know, I deal with injured people, so I'm trying to get people back on the track or on the cross country field, and then you're going to, and if you see anyone in that nature, is again, you're just going to be looking at, can you contribute to potentially improving their performance? But when it comes down to it, how much volume of running for that particular athlete comes to the sports coach. It would have been ideal for a running coach to be here to kind of say, well, look, how would we work this? And how would you answer this question? because you would definitely need to communicate between all three, because all three are going to be looking for the same thing, which is to improve the running.
Yeah, but I mean, that would have been my first question, would have been to get a little bit more context of the whole entire question, because you know, I would assume that at that level, the strength and conditioning coach and the running coach are communicating, and that
and that's presumption.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you would hope so, because that could be where the problem lies otherwise. But I would imagine at that level that they are, because if it were me, I wouldn't be signing off on an athlete like that to do a strength and conditioning program and running without at least two of them said, well, I'm doing heavy squats here, so you know. And again, heavy squats is relative.
Yeah.
And then you've got to run in the next day. That doesn't sound very smart, does it? You know, but I'm sure that's not what's going on. But in case that, you know, that's my view on it, in case that is what's going on. But again, I doubt it is. But I mean, my focus there for that particular question, you know, is the sore part, is first and foremost, you know, what do they mean by sore? Because that could point more towards not the S&C, not the running, but actually, is your recovery protocol good? You know, are you resting correctly? Are you getting the right nutrition? Are you getting the right hydration? And then it comes down to something else. Harlequin, before he died, he was a big advocate for identifying deficiencies and intolerances within the human body. And he got involved in a few studies where he showed the impact that a deficiency can have on the body. And even in intolerance, things like being gluten intolerant can have a huge effect on the body and how you recover and how you process your food. Because don't forget, you create the stimulus in the S&C session or the running session, and then it's the recovery and the nutrition and the rest that creates the adaptation. So if you've got a gluten intolerance, then that's going to affect your recovery, isn't it? You know, it's going to, you know, you might, even if at a very base level, you could be lying at night not getting enough sleep because your stomach's hurt, or you know, your body's not metabolizing the food in the right way because it's got something in there that it perceives as the enemy, you know. But that's why I feel that at that level, there's a real need for getting blood tests done.
So before kind of rushing down the blood test route, but I think there's some great points in there. Is that kind of like the first thing is right? Was it planned that potentially in this part of the season? So I would always start off with assessment. So
I've got my buddy here, and I'd pull them in and say, "Look at these. Should they go next to each other or not?"
Yeah. So you get an assessment of, so where are we at? Where are we in the season? Are we looking for adaptation in speed, strength, speed endurance, power? Where in the race has the coach possibly identified where she's maybe lacking a certain quality, and that by building that quality up. So they would have, you know, the first thing is measurement. So if you're not being measured, then you are guessing again. So is there a strength concern for her height and weight, for her performance? And this usually the strength coaches will have, if they've dealt with runners for a while, will have an idea of, look, this is the kind of numbers you should be hitting in the gym for your kind of size, in order for it not to be a strength problem. You know, and is it a power problem? Are you being power tested? Is that an issue? Is it speed and really explosivity up hills or whatever? And then whereabouts in the season are you doing it? So as you said, what is sore? Is this sore because you just had a really strong session, but you're far away from competition? They're going to sacrifice a little bit of soreness potentially, but what you don't want to do is accumulative soreness. So that's kind of like, it's then affected. You might go, because you could go S&C session, get a bit sore, light run, next session was fine. Okay.
Well, in some ways, a light run will clear out the lactic acid.
Yeah, so that's soreness, and that could be what we're dealing with. But if you're like sore, and then you're sore again, so then your track session's a bit shit because you're still suffering from that session you did in the gym 2 days ago, and now your track quality is down. Then you're thinking, wait a minute, that's 2 days now to recover from that session. My opinion, that's probably that, unless there's a really good necessary need for that's probably a bit too long to recover. And then that might just be where you have a chat with, actually intensity went up that day. We ramped up the weights, so we ramped up the volume, and that might be just something where you may just need to, all right, well, that was just a one-off. But if it's then happening week on week, you know, and session after session, yeah, you're definitely going to have to start looking at possibly either the intensity and, as you said, the recovery. So you can go to both quite quickly. So are you sleeping well? Have you got any way of monitoring things like heart rate variability, just generally feeling well, feeling fatigued? Have you got other symptoms like that that are going on? Skin, you know, breaking nails, cracked lips, you know, feeling run down, those kind of obvious.
You know? And things like, you know, appetite and sex drive is another one as well. I know it's a bit crude, and I apologise, but it is an indicator, you know.
Absolutely. If that's feeling like that, then you probably need to go down the routes of, what am I doing? Am I actually monitoring this? And there's loads of apps and stuff that you can get for that, and normals that you should be basing off. And if not, I'm sure in that environment, you'd be able to find it out pretty quickly. So I think looking at recovery strategies would be an obvious one. And then if that's kind of on point, then you're starting to move towards, and the nutrition's on point, and whether you're starting to think it's a medical issue, then you would need to see a medical professional, then obviously decide, or whether you're going to go down the route of really investigating nutritional deficits.
Do you know whether Grace has any dietary restrictions at all?
No, not off the top of my head, no. So I think from the point of view is, if we stick with regards to this kind of S&C sessions, again, as I say, should be complementary for the running. So if the running, the other flip on it was if she's sore from running, so she's done a session in running and she's then going into the S&C session sore and can't perform at the level that is demanded of her, does she adjust the S&C session? And in my opinion, yeah, you do. Yeah, because again, it comes back. It comes.
You might be looking more about mobilization, going through the movement patterns, identifying different things, and everything that you do, the whole thing is this. It's all feedback. You know, it's all feedback, and if you're listening to the feedback, then you can adjust accordingly. I mean, when I write a program for somebody, say I do a 4-week block for somebody, I fully do not intend for that 4-week block to be exactly what they do, because things will come up as you go along the way, and it will change it. You know, it could be anything. It could be something to do with the program. It could be that they tripped on a step the other day. it could be anything. You know. So.
Yeah. The other thing as well is, and this is the kind of this is the other thing that, again, we're not talking. You know, if Grace is listening, this isn't about her or her coaching situation. We have no idea about that. So this is just this is hypothetical in some ways. But like, the other thing about it is if you're in competition, you're in a team.
Yeah.
You know, like she's an individual sport, but they're a team. You know, you get selected, and you know, and if you turn up, and the relationship, this comes back to the relationship again with your coach, and what we talked about last time about trusting somebody. And if you don't feel that you can say, you know, I'm a bit sore today, is that a failure?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, like she's over there. I
had that in the back of my mind when you were saying it, but again, I'm careful. I don't want to. I don't have the we don't have the context. So, I think we're both being careful not to offend as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I don't. I think she can understand, as we say, we said that we don't know. But what I'm trying to say is that all the different things you need to look into. So if she says, no, it's not that. That's not the nutrition. Oh yeah, actually, no, I didn't realize I could just adjust it, or whatever, and it's simple as that. Or actually, I was just interested, but actually, I'm doing fine. She might be like that, and she's just trying to ask a really good question, you know, for other people, may. But what's important is that when you're an athlete, though, you've got that, you know, even especially in a team or anything like that, is if you see somebody, and I think this is where it's a really mindfuck as well, because it might only go on for a couple of weeks, and it's probably nothing. But you see, you know, Martha over there smashing it in the gym, smashing it on the track, and seems to be doing really well, and you don't want to turn up and go, oh, I don't want to do this. But that might be because Martha's at that stage of her training or her cycle where she's at. She, you know, and you know, all the different things that might be going on. You could be menstrual. You could have some stuff going on. She's at uni, so you could have uni stuff going on. That person may not be having that. But then when you're in there going, oh, better maybe not say anything, because I don't want to really, you know, I'm all right, I'm okay. But then if that's happening, so if there is a thing where you feel that you don't want to say anything because you don't want to feel like you're letting anyone down, or you think that you're not good enough, and you're over under the pressures, there's no doubt there's pressures there, is that you have to kind of go, okay, right, well, wait a minute, you can't let that keep going on, I think would be my advice to anyone if they're in that position, would be like, right, you would have to start asking questions about, is then this affecting your performance? So if you miss the odd session and you just do it and you're a bit sore, but running is fine and your times are still good, then all right. But if the times are going down and, and unhappiness is kicking in because you're down, and then you're like, oh, I'm just getting by, that's when you start making poor decisions and the injury risk goes up. So it's this thing, is this a recovery, nutritional, etc. type thing? Is this something medical that you need to go and speak to somebody medical? Is this something to do with just happens to be that session and it gets better, or we do need to adjust the session?
And also, I mean, everything, as you well know, everything is important. When it comes to being a professional athlete, every part of your life is important. Everything you do. And you've just, you said to me at the beginning that did you say she was in America?
Yeah.
And how old is she? Is she
oh God, yes, good question. She could be like between 18 and 20, maybe 19.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
She had 24. She's not 24.
But, I mean, so you're 18 to 20
under 20,
old.
I think, under 20.
Yeah. So you're 20 years old. You're in America. That's massive.
Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, that's going to have an enormous psychological impact on you, which in turn is going to have a huge psychological impact on everything else. Your central nervous system, your recovery, your ability to be able to get in the right intensity. So, I mean, she shouldn't be too hard on herself. I mean, it sounds like she's doing she's on a really good.
Yeah, and as I said, this question may not even be related to. I think it could even just be. Sometimes I get a bit sore. Is that okay?
Yeah.
It could be, and knowing Grace as well. That's probably what it is. She's one of the mentally strongest people I ever worked with. It's incredible. So I think it was a great question for probably a bigger audience of people, not just her specifically. And I think what we needed to do is just touch on the possible options that people might need to look at that they may have not looked at before. So it's quite good to be a little bit open and not necessarily specific to her, because I think
something I would say to any athlete is, and as a coach, I love it when clients do it. I don't always have the answers, but I love it when they do it. I always like to be questioned. Why? I remember when I was doing my PT course all the way back in 2006, I did it in the National Badminton Centre in Milton Keynes. And every morning, me and a guy named Sasha, who played rugby at the time, we used to go and have a game of badminton as we were waiting, because we'd all have to get there a bit earlier to avoid traffic and whatnot. And every day on the court next to us, we'd watch this girl walk around the perimeter of the badminton court in a squat position, just walking around as part of a warm-up. And I was on this course for 3 months, and after about 2 months we didn't see her anymore. And I started questioning my coach and saying to them, what happened to because you get talking, don't you, and stuff like that. And they said, she's injured. I said, what happened? Oh, well, apparently the coach was making her walk around the perimeter in a squat position, and now her knees are bucketed. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrendous. That's the coach that did that, But so my point being is that, always question the coach. If it were me, I would have said, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? Tell me why. If you can give me a good reason, then that's good, because it actually hurts a little bit, because there would have been warning signs, I'm sure. She would have been like, oh, my knees are really hurting. I'm not surprised. You're not surprised at all, And
it's difficult. Like I was watching something quite controversial last night on about runners. It was the Alberto Salazar stuff. Have you heard about it? Mo Farah's coach in the States, Nike Oregon project. Right. It was a panorama program about it, and just talking to runners. Forget about the actual idea of why he was suspended and stuff, but it was just some of the runners is that kind of like, I was watching a Michael Jordan thing as well, and all these things is that pressure from on people to compete and to stay in there and not moan too much and maybe not ask questions. And I think one of the runners in that program was like, you don't question him. That's you're questioning the philosophy, so she said that. Now I don't know what went on there, so that's a legal thing, and you just know, but it's just that relationship. I've been with coaches who I'm like, every athlete and coach, if they get on well, it's fine. That can make a massive career. That's why you often see like footballers sign with certain managers, because they get on with them. they know what the story is, and in others they don't get on with it.
Yeah.
So
they
like,
bring the best out of it. You know?
Yeah, like Eric Cantona at Man United kicked someone in the crowd, and still, you know, Ferguson knew how to manage him and got the best out of him, and they win titles. You know, so you have to manage people differently, and if you can't, as you said, you go, I'll ask questions. But that's Johnny Lawrence. Like, you know, sometimes it's other people may not be able to have that confidence, and then it's like, well, then what do you need to do to be able to add to that? So it's nearly working on communication from an athlete to a professional level, and that's difficult when you're young as well. You know, as you say, in another country, and then trying to be like, you know, I'm trying to fit in here and try and do my best and get my head down. And just,
you know, we don't have setups like they do in the United States. I mean, I can't even imagine walking into a university S&C campus. Can you imagine? It'd be absolutely amazing. I mean, you'd never seen such equipment and talented coaches and support.
And then there's the presumption. Is the presumption again? Is as well, like, you know, you see all the time is like, just because the stuff is amazing doesn't necessarily mean is amazing coaching either. You know, as you said. Having that healthy kind of like, wait a minute, my performance isn't doing very well. I don't seem to be feeling very, you know, I don't feel good with this. This isn't helping me. And having that kind of confidence to do is tough. And I think they probably need people outside. If you are an athlete and you're struggling with this, I think you need to kind of nearly have somebody outside of running and completely kind of go, this is what I'm doing. What would you put up with this kind of thing? If that's, I think we've gone way sidetracked from what Grace asked originally, but I think it's really important because, again, it ties in what we're interested in fundamentally, which is the patient, the client, or the athlete, whatever you want to call them, is the most important thing. And then from that, you grow, whether you grow them to be able to internally manage their mental health or physical health is absolutely essential. That's the one thing. That's what you have to find out what makes them tick first, and then go from there. And I think, you know, that we just dived into what in therapy land is the biopsychosocial model, where we're looking at obviously the biology of nutrition, etc., but then the psychology of all the different relationships you have to deal with, not only in uni but also in track or whatever, and then the social side of things and just all that communication. So
there could be pressure for her to socialize, and that could involve alcohol or, you know, or late nights or whatever, which you can't blame a 20-year-old in the United States of America who wants to go. So, I mean, at the moment,
hence not an athlete.
Yeah.
You're
one of these people that goes drinking and occasionally plays sport.
Sad. No, I can't. I had 2 glasses. It was my anniversary last night, my wife's anniversary, and then thank you. And we had 2 glasses of prosecco, and I felt like someone hit me with a bloody, you know. I was like, oh my god, I'm about 90. I can't believe I said that on here as well. But anyway, let's go. We got, because we're being good boys today.
We are. We're going to try.
We've got 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
8 minutes. That time flies when you're having fun. And I don't want to generally, I'm just trying to see if there's any. This might be a fairly a quicker question to answer. I think so. I think we'll do this one and then the others later on, because I think we can get through this. So this comes from a good friend of mine, Charlie Davis. He is an ex-PE teacher, so he's left PE, so he's coach, but he's also the assistant coach at Falmouth Town Football Club. So he's involved in coaching good footballers. I'm only joking, no, it's good footballers. So if you're watching, lads, I am joking.
Don't go out and churro. Go Falmouth. Just remember, lads,
that's so low banter on their level that they probably wouldn't even notice it. But yeah, no, good lads. But he asked a good question that I often have to talk about with sport, but he's specifically asking for football and as a coach as well. So he says, any thoughts on players, specifically football, out with injuries and not being able to play but wanting to improve? So they can't play, they've got injuries. So this could be plus or minus COVID, because obviously people with COVID, they just can't play football. They can only do, because they can't go and play obviously in teams. But if they're injured, I use this a lot as well. What happens? What can they do apart from the rehab to kind of improve them as a footballer, because they can't play the sport? And then it'd be great to facilitate that. So then, as a coach of injured and fit players, so even now in this time when he's trying to keep players together and trying to motivate them and trying to say, how are they going to not all just come back less players because they're deconditioned and haven't played for 6 or 7 months potentially when they get back in September. So any thoughts on how, I have my thoughts, but any thoughts yourself that jump out at you that you think they could help to improve performance or work on, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Again, if they're injured, it very much depends on what the nature of their injury is. If it's a lower body injury, then my thoughts would be to work on your upper body and vice versa. But overarching, I would say identify your weaknesses. And I don't just mean that from a strength position or a mobility position. I mean gameplay as well, like getting to know a bit more about the coach and the way the coach does plays on the pitch, court, whatever. And that way you can start to sort of, when you're playing your sport, you've got a better understanding of what's trying to be achieved as an individual player and an overall team. And then there's other things like, say you're struggling with nerves before the game, you might want to find an approach that helps with that. Just identifying general weaknesses that you have, but you can work on whilst you're not doing your sport. And that might even be your fitness. It might just, like you said, if it's not an injury, if it's everyone's not playing football at the moment due to COVID-19, then how can I keep fit? Can I go cycling?
And I think running? you the key things there, because a lot of times people get generic answers like, and you didn't. That was not a generic answer at all. But, no. But you did what people may hear out of that was train your upper body and try and something else there. But what you did say, what might have got lost there, because it was right on the money, was the weaknesses. Because people don't want to identify them. We talked about this possibly last week, and that's the thing. You were like going gameplay and coaching and learning the game better, which sounds like, oh, I know the game, and we're the worst. I am an ex-footballer, so I was like, I know everything about the game, and not a clue until I was in uni and I did a UEFA B coaching license, and Jesus, did I kind of go, oh my God, goalkeepers. Now I know actually why I need to be here when they are centre forwards. You need to try
and get into everyone's position. Like you need to understand, you can become more optimal as the position you're playing in if you understand the person that you're passing to, or the person that's doing something over here, or what the coach is saying. Because as a footballer, as an athlete, your focus is, say you want to be a UFC fighter, you just like fighting, right? You want to get in there and you want to go, you don't care about this and that, but actually when you're not doing that and you can't get in the ring and fight, then actually you need to start getting in your head and understanding what's going on in there, identifying weaknesses. And when I say that, I don't mean strength weaknesses as such, although that could be one, or physical weaknesses. I mean all weaknesses, having a fuller understanding of all aspects of what you're doing,
And how to take advantage in this time, because there's going to be no better time to work on them, because you haven't got an option to play football. Like if football's the option, you're going to take that. Yeah. If I love squatting and there's a squat rack, I'm going to go fucking squat. But if there's no squat rack now, or there's no football, then I've got fuck on equipment and I can run around and kick a ball about myself, but it gets boring after a while. Yeah. Have I got space to do some assessment on, do I need to look at speed? Do I need to look at, am I good in the air? Am I ring the coach and then go to the coach like going, where am I, honestly, where am I weak? What's my options here? And then if it's like change of direction or running backwards or just not having that endurance, like going, well then, look, you need to program 6 weeks of that. It's going to taste like shit because you won't like it. It's not what you like doing. It's your weakness. So it's going to be uncomfortable. But and the other advice to charity as well, like, pal, don't bounce your fucking head off a wall trying to get some players who just are going, I don't care. So you do have to kind of think, like, do you want to improve? They ring you up and they're like, right, this is what we're going to do. And you get players who's not interested. Then sometimes you just have to kind of go, right, that's up to them. Look, here's some options. But what you do want to do is the ones who put their hand up is you grab them and then you get them. And that's what I've noticed that with patients. When I've got patients, I identify, you'll say some stuff and you'll know from what they're giving back, either they haven't got the time or space or mental strength to do that right now, and you back away. And then I had a rugby player, international level. She was 18, dislocated her shoulder, out of the game for at least a year. And we were talking about, like, really dedicated, amazing young girl. She was really sound, did the rehab, like, one of those classic charts on the wall straight away, really, really good, dedicated. And she went and did her coaching badge at 18. And she did a rugby coaching badge, and she was like, oh my, she just learned so much more about the game in that time. And it was just like, we started talking more about that. So she's now got, she can't play her sport, but she's got that she's now reading plays. She now knows to read the game better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she said at the start it was crap. She said he hated it, and
coaching course is a killer.
like they're just, sitting there, and it's waiting around, and you're waiting for and again, it's more, but it's communication. So again, if you're involved in, like, your job is involved in that, if you learn how to coach more and see that, you then become a better communicator. You then probably can, when your boss asks you to do a presentation in front of 10 people, you mightn't be as nervous this time because you're used to having to communicate and develop those things. There's other skills you get from that. And I think the other key thing as well, from like Charlie's question, the other Charlie, we've got 3 Charlies on these questions. Charlie Curry, the cyclist last week, who asked about, mindset and preparation. Like, we said that to the death last time. So if you haven't saw that clip, go back to the last week's clip, because we talk about that, how mental mindset and stuff like that is a big one.
Where's that available, by the way?
That's available on both our YouTube channels, ProCare Sports and Johnny Lawrence PT. Subscribe, share, like. Or on all our social media, which is amazing. We've got about 6 followers, and
that's a shared following.
yeah, I've got 4 of them though. One of them is my wife.
I was hoping you were joking on that, by the way.
So I think, I think that's it. It's just identifying that, and I think, using those strategies and then if you need to help the players, is kind of going. Your job as a coach is to kind of like, he's that's where his weakness is. So set him a program, and if you can't set the program to develop that, then put him. And I know Charlie well. He knows loads of people anyway. He's like, I call him Don Charlie. So he'll be able to identify someone and say, look, you need to develop speed. These are the guys to go and do some speed work, or get some drills off that. Do that. Come back to me and see where we're at. So
one of my favorite sayings is, "What we practice grows stronger," and I love that because someone will say to me, I'm just really weak in my hamstrings, and I just don't know how to sort it out. And I say, what have you tried? Well, I haven't actually tried anything. Right. Okay. So actually, if you start practicing strengthening your hamstrings, they will get stronger. Anything you practice will get stronger. And that's negative stuff too. If you're one of these people that tells yourself you can't do it, you become somebody that believes they can't do it. So what you practice grows stronger is a great little saying. I love that.
I think when we come back, because we're definitely done now, but I think we'll come back on that note there when you just throw on that little. I was just ready to just jump in like down this big hole there. You come on, mate, no. So behavior change and all that kind of stuff is something definitely that we should jump into a little bit about identifying where people are with that, because it's that, what is the barrier to people making those kind of obvious, I'm weak but I don't do anything to sort it out. That in itself is, there's reasons and layers behind that. Okay, buddy, I think we did better this week. We got 3, I think, done. So we've got a couple left. Again, we've got Cody Cook, professional footballer. We've got another one from, which is a good question, Ellie Jans, 3-dan martial artist. She'll kick the head of you. Another good Reece Salisbury's got PT and nutritionist as well, so he's got a good question as well. So we've got more questions to answer, and then we'll meet up again and get that out. All right, buddy.
Excellent, mate.
All right, nice talking to you. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and see you again next time.